Welcome back, guys. 80% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. The cold I felt wasn't just cold. It was something alive, creeping through your skin and wrapping itself around every bone. I knew this mission was different the moment we stepped off the transport truck in northern Minnesota. 12 years in uniform teaches you to read situations, to sense when something is wrong. And with this mission, everything was wrong. I'm Sergeant James Rowe, 38 years old, career military. I've seen my share of deployments. I've spent nights in deserts where the temperature changes 40 degrees between sunset and sunrise. I've patrolled mountains where the air is so thin you can barely think. But the Lake of the Woods region in February, this was something else entirely. They called it a winter survival exercise. 2 weeks in the deep forest with minimal supplies. Standard training, they said. Routine, they said. 4 of us would navigate to preset waypoints using only a map and compass, keep radio contact every 72 hours, and get picked up on day 14. Simple enough on paper. Our team was small. Lieutenant Mason was the officer in charge, fresh from training, maybe 27 years old. He had that look. The one officers get when they're trying to show confidence they don't feel. I'd seen it before. The weight of command sits heavy on young shoulders, especially when you know you're out of your depth. Then there was Private Collins, 21, skinny, with nervous energy coming off him like heat. This was his first real field exercise. He tried to hide his fear behind jokes and forced enthusiasm, but I saw his hands shake when he checked his rifle. The kid had heart, but heart doesn't keep you warm at -40. Corporal Diaz was our anchor. Former ranger, solid, skilled, the kind of soldier who doesn't need to prove anything. He had quiet confidence, the type earned through experience. His grandfather had been Ojibwe, he'd mentioned once. He grew up hearing stories about these woods. I hadn't paid much attention at the time. I should have. The briefing had been unusually short. Navigate 3 waypoints over 14 days. Keep to the communication schedule. Survive. They mentioned extreme weather and possible wildlife encounters, but nothing specific. Nothing that explained why they'd chosen this particular region. Why now? Why us? We shouldered our packs, 60 pounds each, and started walking. The snow was already knee-deep, and according to the weather report we'd received, more was coming. The forest swallowed us within minutes. Towering pines, bare birch trees standing like skeletal sentries in silence. Total, crushing silence. How far to waypoint 1? Collins asked. His voice sounded too loud, almost rude in that stillness. Mason checked the GPS, frowned, and checked it again. 15 kilometers. We should reach it by nightfall. 15 clicks in normal terrain was nothing. Out here, with the snow and cold, we'd be lucky to make it before dark. The first problem showed up within an hour. Mason's GPS started acting strange. The position marker jumped around, placing us in 3 different locations at the same time. He tapped it, reset it, but the weird behavior continued. Interference, Diaz said, pulling out his compass. Happens sometimes with magnetic deposits in the ground. I checked my own compass. The needle wobbled, then settled on a direction. Mason checked his, different reading, maybe 10 degrees off from mine. Diaz's compass showed a 3rd direction entirely. We stood there in the snow, for trained soldiers with 3 different compass readings, and nobody wanted to say what we were all thinking. This wasn't normal equipment failure. This was something else. We stick with the original bearing, Mason decided. Northwest. If we're off, we'll correct at the next waypoint. What choice did we have? Turn back on day 1 because our compasses disagreed? We were soldiers. We'd trained for problems. So we kept walking, each of us privately wondering if we were heading the right direction. The day wore on. The temperature dropped steadily. My thermometer read -28 degrees Celsius by mid-afternoon, and the wind was picking up. The sky, overcast since morning, grew darker. Not the natural darkening of sunset, but something heavier, more threatening. That's when Collins found the tracks. Sergeant, his voice cracked. Look at this. We gathered around. Pressed deep into the snow were tracks. Large tracks, four-toed, each print as long as my forearm. They ran parallel to our path, leading off into the trees. "Wolf," Diaz said after studying them. "Big one. Maybe 200 pounds. "Wolves don't get that big," Mason protested. "Timber wolves do out here. They can reach 250. It's rare, but it happens." Collins looked pale. "Is it following us?" "Wolves avoid humans," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It probably heard us and moved off. We're fine." But the tracks told a different story. They weren't moving away. They were pacing us, staying parallel, like something was watching our progress, studying us. We kept moving, but the atmosphere changed. Every rustle in the brush made us flinch. Every crack of a branch snapped our heads around. Collins kept looking over his shoulder. Even Diaz seemed tense, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line. By the time we found a camping spot, darkness had fallen hard. We set up in a small clearing, 2 tents, dug a fire pit. The heat from our small fire felt like salvation. We huddled around it, heating rations, trying to drive the deep cold from our bones. Nobody talked much. We were all thinking about those tracks, about how far we were from help, about the fact that our basic navigation equipment couldn't agree on which direction was north. "My grandfather told me stories about these woods," Diaz said suddenly. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "He was Ojibwe, grew up not far from here." "What kind of stories?" Collins asked, trying to sound casual. Diaz stared into the flames. "He said there were places where people disappeared. Not lost, not killed by animals, just gone. The old people had a name for what took them." He paused, and in that pause the wind picked up, making the fire flicker. "Wendigo," he said. The word felt heavy, dangerous somehow, like speaking it out loud gave it power. "That's folklore," Mason said quickly. "Superstition." "Maybe," Diaz agreed. "But my grandfather believed it. He said the Wendigo was created by hunger. In the worst winters, when food ran out, sometimes people would eat things they shouldn't, human flesh. And once they did, once they crossed that line, they changed. Became something else. Something always hungry, never satisfied, always hunting." "That's enough," I cut in. "We don't need ghost stories. What we need is rest. Collins, you and Mason take first watch. 2 hours, then wake us." I could see the relief on Collins's face. He didn't want to be alone with his thoughts. Mason just nodded, accepting the order. Inside our tent, Diaz and I lay in our sleeping bags. The cramped space was barely big enough for 2 men, but it was warmer than outside, and warmth was everything. "You believe those stories?" I asked quietly. Diaz was silent for a moment. "My grandfather wasn't superstitious. He was a practical man, a hunter. He knew these woods better than anyone. But he believed, said he'd seen the signs. Trees stripped of bark in winter, like something was trying to eat them. Bones in clearings cracked open for marrow. And sounds. He said you could hear it calling in voices you recognized, but twisted somehow. Wrong. I didn't respond. Outside, the wind howled. Trees creaked and groaned in the cold. And once, just once, I thought I heard something else. A sound like breathing, slow and deep, coming from just beyond our firelight. But when I unzipped the tent to check, there was nothing. Just Mason and Collins by the dying fire, rifles across their laps, their breath steaming in the freezing air. Just the forest watching, waiting. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay there listening to every sound, every shift in the wind. My mind kept circling back to those tracks, to Diaz's stories, to the way our compasses had spun uselessly. Sometime deep in the night, I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A voice calling out in the darkness. Help! Someone! Help! I sat up fast, reaching for my rifle. Beside me, Diaz was already awake. You heard it, he whispered. I nodded. We unzipped the tent quietly. Outside, Mason and Collins were alert, staring into the darkness beyond our camp. There, Collins pointed with a shaking hand. I saw something, a light, maybe moving through the trees. We scanned the forest. Nothing. Just darkness and the faint glow of our dying fire. Probably just the wind, Mason said, but his voice lacked conviction. We sat there for the rest of the night, weapons ready, watching the darkness. The voice didn't come again, but the feeling remained. The sense that something out there was watching us, waiting for us to drop our guard. When morning finally came, gray and cold, we broke camp in silence. Nobody mentioned the voice. Nobody talked about what Collins had seen. We just packed our gear and started walking. But I noticed something as we left. Fresh tracks in the snow around our campsite. The same large four-toed prints from yesterday. They circled our camp, coming within meters of our tents. Whatever had made them had stood there watching us sleep. ##, we were 3 days in when everything started falling apart. The morning began with Collins throwing up behind a tree, his body rejecting the cold rations we'd been surviving on. Diaz checked him over, concerned about the pale, waxy quality of his skin. "He needs real food," Diaz told me quietly. "Hot food. His body is burning calories just to stay warm, and we're not taking in enough to make up for it." I knew he was right. We were all losing weight. Our faces were thin, our movements slower. The cold was eating us alive from the inside out. Mason was falling apart in a different way. The responsibility of command was crushing him. Every decision felt like a test he was failing. When I asked about our route, he just stared at the map like the terrain features would magically rearrange themselves into something familiar. "We should be seeing the second waypoint by now," he said. "A ridgeline with a distinctive rock formation. But there's nothing. Just trees. Endless trees." He wasn't wrong. According to our timeline, we should have reached waypoint 2 yesterday. But the landscape around us looked nothing like what the map showed. It was as if we'd walked into a different forest entirely. That afternoon, the weather turned. Clouds rolled in fast, dropping visibility to almost nothing. The temperature dropped. Within an hour, we were in a full whiteout. "We need shelter," I shouted over the wind. "Now!" We stumbled through the storm, roped together so nobody would get separated. Diaz led, breaking trail. I brought up the rear, keeping Collins moving. The kid was slowing down badly, his movements sluggish. Early hypothermia. We had maybe an hour before it became critical. "Collins!" I grabbed his arm. "Stay with me. Keep moving." He nodded, but his eyes were glazed. Diaz found a depression, probably an old stream bed, with a fallen pine creating natural shelter. We crawled inside, pulled our packs close, and huddled together for warmth. The storm raged for hours. 6 hours of wind that screamed like something alive, of snow so thick we couldn't see beyond our shelter. We rationed our chemical heaters carefully, using just enough to prevent frostbite. Collins shivered uncontrollably despite being wrapped in 2 sleeping bags and an emergency blanket. His lips were blue, his skin ice cold. Diaz kept checking his hands and feet, looking for frostbite. "How long?" Mason asked me, his voice hollow. "Rations? 10 days if we stretch them. Fuel? Maybe 4 if we're careful. And if we don't find the waypoint." I didn't answer. We both knew. No waypoint meant no position confirmation. No confirmation meant no scheduled check-in. And if we missed check-in, command would assume equipment failure, not emergency. They wouldn't send help. Not for 72 hours minimum. When the storm finally broke, the world had transformed. Snow had drifted in massive piles, some higher than our heads. Trees were covered in ice. Branches were bent and broken under the weight. We dug ourselves out and took stock. All gear was accounted for. No frostbite, though Collins's fingers were still dangerously pale. We burned through 3 days of fuel in one night. "We keep moving," Mason said, trying to sound authoritative. "The waypoint has to be close." But when he looked at the map, his hands shook. The terrain around us didn't match. Nothing matched. The ridge we were supposed to be seeing wasn't there. The landmarks were wrong. We were completely, utterly lost. "We're not finding any waypoint," Diaz said bluntly. "We need a new plan." "We follow water," I said. "Find a stream, follow it downstream. Eventually, it'll lead to a river, and rivers lead to civilization." It wasn't a great plan, but it was all we had. We spent the rest of that day searching. As we walked, I started noticing things. Scratches on trees, long vertical gouges in the bark, too high to be from any normal animal. Some were fresh, sap still oozing. Others were old, weathered gray. Diaz, I called him over. What do you make of this? He studied the marks, running his gloved hand over them. Could be bear, marking territory. Bears are hibernating, and these are 3 meters off the ground. He didn't answer, but I saw his jaw tighten. Something big had made these marks. Something that could reach impossibly high. That night, we camped in a small area surrounded by boulders. Defensible positioning if it came to that. We kept the fire small and set a strict watch rotation. I took first watch with Diaz. Collins and Mason slept restlessly. I could hear Collins whimpering in his sleep, a broken sound that made something in my chest ache. He's breaking, Diaz said quietly. Mentally. Another few days and he'll be no use to anyone. He'll hold, I said. More hope than conviction. You smell that? I sniffed. Under the smoke, under the clean scent of snow, there was something else. Sweet, rotten, like meat gone bad. Dead animal, I said. Died in the storm, probably. Probably, Diaz agreed. But he moved his rifle closer. The smell grew stronger as night deepened. By the time Mason and Collins took their watch, it was overwhelming, making my eyes water. I told Mason to stay alert, to wake us if anything approached. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tracks. Those impossible tracks circling our camp. And I heard Diaz's words. Asterisk the Wendigo, created by hunger. Always hunting. Asterisk. Sometime in the deepest part of night, I heard it. A voice, human but wrong, like someone learning to speak for the first time. Sergeant Rowe, it whispered. My name carried on the cold air. Sergeant Rowe, where are you? I sat up fast, rifle in hand. Mason and Collins were by the fire, both alert, both staring into the darkness. Did you hear that? Mason's voice was tight. I heard it, Collins said. He was shaking badly. We sat there for the rest of the night, weapons ready, eyes on the darkness. The voice didn't come again. But in the morning, we found new tracks around our camp. The same prints from day one, circling us, coming closer each night. And that's when I knew. Whatever was out here, whatever had made those tracks and called my name in the darkness, it wasn't going to let us leave. We weren't on a survival exercise anymore. We were being hunted. Hashtag day 5 broke with a sky we found their bodies. Day 5 broke with a sky the color of old bruises. The thermometer read -37 degrees Celsius. Cold enough that our eyelashes froze when we blinked. Cold enough that breathing hurt. Collins looked worse. His lips were cracked and bleeding despite the protective balm. His hands shook constantly now, not just from cold, but from something deeper. Fear, maybe, or the beginning of something worse. Private, I put my hand on his shoulder. You good to move? He nodded without meeting my eyes. Did you hear it last night, Sergeant? The voice, calling your name. I heard wind. That's all. It knew your name, he insisted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer for that because he was right. It had known my name. We broke camp in heavy silence. Mason checked our supplies while Diaz scouted the area. The news wasn't good. We'd burned through more fuel than planned. Rations were holding, but barely. Water was becoming critical. I found something, Diaz called from about 30 meters out. We joined him quickly. Tracks, but not the large four-toed prints we'd been seeing. These were human. Military boots, standard issue, leading off into the forest. Someone else is out here, Collins said. And for the first time in days, there was hope in his voice. Mason pulled out the radio immediately. This could be another unit. Maybe they have working comms. He keyed the mic. Any station. Any station. This is Bravo 24. Over. Static hissed back at us. Any station. This is Bravo 24 requesting status. Over. Then, breaking through the static, a voice. Distant. Broken. Bravo 2. Read you. Faint. Say again. Over. Mason's voice was urgent. Cold. So cold. Help us, please. The transmission dissolved into static. Mason tried several more times, but got nothing. We follow these tracks, he decided. If there's another unit out here, they might have supplies. Working equipment. Diaz crouched beside the prince, his face troubled. Look at the spacing. The depth. Whoever made these wasn't walking straight. They were stumbling. Injured, maybe. Then they need our help, Collins said. Or they're already dead, I thought, but kept it to myself. We followed the tracks. They led us through increasingly dense forest, weaving between trees in no logical pattern. Whoever made them wasn't navigating toward anything. They were wandering, lost. After an hour of following the messy trail, we found the first piece of gear. A military backpack, half buried in snow. Diaz dug it out and opened it carefully. Inside, rations, a sleeping bag, personal effects, a wallet with a military ID. Sergeant Paul Richardson, Diaz read aloud. He paused, frowning. Assigned to. His voice trailed off. Bravo 24. That's impossible, Mason said. We're Bravo 24. There isn't another unit with that designation. We stared at the ID. The photo showed a man in his 30s, dark hair, strong jaw. But the issue date made my blood run cold. 20 years ago. This has to be a mistake, Mason said. Or old training equipment. They sometimes use expired IDs for exercises. But the rations inside were current stock. The gear was modern. And those tracks leading away from the pack were fresh, made within the last few hours. We keep moving, I said. But weapons ready. Something's wrong here. The tracks led us to a clearing. In its center stood a crude shelter built from pine branches. As we approached, that smell hit us again. Sweet, rotting, overwhelming. Cover me, I told Diaz. He raised his rifle while I approached the shelter. Inside, I found sleeping bags. 3 of them arranged around the remains of a fire. The bags were covered in thick frost, frozen solid. I touched one, and the material crumbled under my glove. So frozen it had become brittle. These bags had been here for weeks, maybe longer, but the tracks leading here were fresh. I was about to call the others when I saw the tree. Someone had carved into the bark, gouged deep with something sharp. Help US. Below it, IT follows. And below that, almost illegible. Don't trust your eyes. Sergeant. Collins's voice was panicked. Sergeant, you need to see this now. I emerged from the shelter to find Collins standing at the clearing's edge, staring down at something. When I reached him, my chest tightened. Bodies. 3 of them partially buried in snow, frozen solid. Their skin was blue-gray, their eyes open and glazed with ice. Military uniforms. Their patches marked them as Bravo 24. Check for identification, Mason ordered, his voice shaking. Diaz knelt by the first body, searching pockets with careful hands. He pulled out a wallet. Sergeant Paul Richardson. He moved to the second body. Corporal James Mitchell. The third. Private First Class Sarah Torres. How long have they been dead? Mason asked. Diaz examined them carefully, professional detachment masking whatever he was feeling. Based on the frost buildup, the tissue condition, at least 2 weeks. Maybe 3. But the tracks were fresh, Collins said. We followed fresh tracks here this morning. I know, Diaz said quietly. We stood there, for living soldiers staring at 3 dead ones. The forest around us was absolutely silent. No wind, no animals, no sound except our breathing and the hammering of my heart. That's when we heard it. A voice calling from the trees. Help us. So cold. Please help us. It sounded exactly like Collins. Same pitch, same accent, even the same frightened tremor. But Collins was standing right next to me, his face white with terror. What the hell is that? Mason whispered. We're leaving, I said. Right now. Grab any supplies we can use and move. We worked fast, taking rations from the bodies packs, spare fuel, anything useful. The voice kept calling, moving through the trees, circling our position. Help us. Don't leave us. So cold. Now it sounded like Mason, then like me, then like Diaz. Our own voices thrown back at us from the forest. Pleading, begging. Don't listen, Diaz said, his voice tight. Don't respond. Just move. We formed up tight and started walking, picking a direction at random, just needing to get away from those frozen corpses and that impossible voice. Behind us, I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps crunching through snow. I looked back. Nothing. Just trees and snow and 3 bodies growing smaller with distance. But the footsteps continued. Getting closer. Double time, I ordered. Move now. We broke into a run, as fast as you can move in snow this deep. The footsteps matched our pace. Sometimes ahead of us, sometimes behind, sometimes to the sides. Like whatever was making them was everywhere at once. Collins stumbled and fell. I grabbed him, hauled him upright, kept him moving. His breathing was ragged, his face deathly pale. Sergeant, I can't. I can't. You can and you will. Move, soldier. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs felt like rubber, until we physically couldn't take another step. We collapsed in a dense stand of spruce, gasping, shaking. The footsteps stopped. The forest went silent again. We sat there for what felt like hours, weapons up, listening, waiting. Nothing moved. No sound came. But I could feel it. Whatever had made those tracks, whatever had called to us in our own voices, it was still out there, watching, waiting for us to make a mistake. As the light began to fade, Mason pulled out the map with shaking hands. We need a plan, he said. We need to figure out where we are. The map doesn't matter anymore, Diaz said quietly. This place, it's not following normal rules. That's insane, Mason snapped. There's no such thing as whatever you're implying. We're just disoriented, lost. Once we find a landmark. Those bodies were 3 weeks old, I interrupted. But the tracks leading to them were made this morning. Fresh. This morning. You want to explain that? Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer came. The Wendigo, Diaz continued, his voice low. My grandfather's story said it could mimic voices, that it would call to you, sound like someone you knew, try to lure you away. And once you were alone, what? Collins asked. It would take you, and you'd become like it. Forever hungry, forever hunting, trapped in winter that never ends. The words hung in the cold air between us. None of us wanted to believe it, but after what we'd seen, what we'd heard, belief felt less like a choice and more like something unavoidable. Night fell like a hammer. We made no fire, afraid the light would draw attention. We huddled together in the darkness, sharing body heat, weapons close. I can hear them, Collins whispered. The voices, they're calling my name. Focus on my voice, I told him. Just listen to me, nothing else. But I heard them too, whispers in the dark. My mother's voice, dead 5 years now. My brother killed in action overseas. Friends long gone. All of them calling, promising warmth, promising safety, promising an end to the cold. All of them lying. Sometime deep in that endless night, Diaz nudged me silently. He pointed through the trees. Lights. Pale, flickering lights. Like lanterns swaying in wind. They moved in a line through the forest about 100 meters away, passing parallel to our position. Could be rangers, Mason whispered hopefully. Search and rescue. But no rangers moved at night in these conditions. No rescue team would be out here without making contact, without calling out. The lights passed in complete silence, and in their glow I saw shapes, tall shapes, impossibly thin, moving with a walk that was almost human but not quite. Their limbs were too long, their movements too fluid. Collins made a small, choked sound beside me. The lights faded into the forest. Darkness returned and we sat there, 4 trained soldiers, absolutely terrified. When dawn finally came, none of us had slept. Collins looked like a corpse himself, his eyes sunken, his skin gray. Mason couldn't stop his hands from shaking. Even Diaz looked older, worn down. We need water, I said. Real water. We find a stream today or we start having serious problems. They nodded. What else was there to do? We started walking again. No direction, no plan, just movement. Because staying still felt like death. The forest seemed to close in around us as we walked. The trees grew denser, the shadows deeper. And always, I felt eyes watching from the darkness between the pines. Around midday we found it. A stream, partially frozen, but with water still moving beneath the ice. It was small, barely a trickle, but it was flowing. And flowing water meant direction, meant a way out. We follow it downstream, I said. It'll lead to something bigger eventually. A river, maybe. And rivers lead to civilization. For the first time in days, I saw something like hope in their faces. We turned downstream and started following the water. The going was easier here, the terrain flatter. We made good time. That's when Diaz collapsed. One moment he was walking beside me. The next he went down hard, hitting the snow face first. Diaz! I dropped beside him, rolled him over. His face was flushed, his skin burning hot despite the cold. He's got a fever. Mason checked his forehead. High one. Has to be over 40 degrees. How is that possible? I didn't know. But as I looked at Diaz, at his eyes rolling back, at the way his body was shaking, I felt fear spike through me. Out here, in this cold, with limited supplies, a fever like this was a death sentence. We need to get him warm, Collins said. Find shelter. Build a fire. A fire will draw attention, Mason protested. He'll die without it, Collins shot back. They were both right and both wrong. Because as I looked at Diaz, as I saw his lips moving, forming words I couldn't hear, I realized something terrible. Whatever was out here, whatever had been following us, hunting us, it wasn't just in the forest anymore. It was inside us. And we were running out of time. Hashtag the hunger wins. We dragged Diaz to a sheltered spot beneath an overhanging rock formation. His fever was raging, his body alternating between violent shivering and burning heat. When I checked his pupils, they were dilated unevenly. Not good. We need antibiotics, Mason said, rifling through our medical supplies. We have general-purpose ones, but without knowing what's causing this. Give him what we have, I ordered, and get fluids in him. He's dehydrating fast. Collins built a small fire using our dwindling fuel supply. We had no choice. Without warmth, Diaz would be dead by morning. Mason gave him the antibiotics while I tried to get water into him. Sergeant. Diaz grabbed my wrist suddenly, his grip surprisingly strong. His eyes were wide, unfocused. It's in the trees. Can you see it? In the trees. Nothing's there, I said gently. You're sick. You're seeing things. No. He shook his head violently. No, it's there. It's been there since day one. Watching, waiting for us to get weak. His voice dropped to a whisper. It knows we're hungry. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Collins looked at me, his face pale. Sergeant, we are hungry. We've been rationing for days. I can barely think straight anymore. He was right. We were all losing weight rapidly. The cold burned calories faster than we could take them in. My stomach felt like it was eating itself. The protein bars we'd been surviving on weren't enough. Not even close. We'll hunt tomorrow, I said. Set snares. There has to be something out here. Rabbits, squirrels, something. But even as I said it, I knew it was hollow. We hadn't seen a single animal track except for those impossible prints that kept circling our camps. No birds, no squirrels, no deer. It was as if every living thing had fled this part of the forest, or been taken. That night, Diaz's condition worsened. He thrashed in his sleeping bag, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Spanish mixed with something else, something older. His grandfather's language, maybe. What's he saying? Mason asked. I shook my head, but some of the words were clear enough. Wendigo, different ways of saying the same thing. And one phrase he kept repeating, it's already inside. Around midnight he started screaming. Not in pain, in terror. His eyes were open but unseeing, staring at something only he could see. He pointed at the darkness beyond our fire. There. Don't you see them? They're right there. Hundreds of them. I grabbed his shoulders. Diaz, nothing's there. You're hallucinating. The fever. No. He fought against me with surprising strength. They're standing right there. Dead eyes. Empty eyes. They're hungry. So hungry. And they want us to join them. Collins backed away from the fire, his rifle up, scanning the darkness. What if he's right? What if they're really out there? They're not, Mason said, but his voice lacked conviction. How do you know? Collins demanded. We found 3 dead soldiers. We heard our own voices calling to us. We've seen things that shouldn't exist. How do you know it's real anymore? Because if we start believing in ghosts, I said firmly, we're finished. We need to stay rational. Stay focused. Diaz has a fever. He's delirious. That's all. But my words felt hollow even to me. We restrained Diaz gently, tying his hands to prevent him from hurting himself. He eventually exhausted himself and fell into a restless sleep, but his lips kept moving, whispering things I was glad I couldn't hear. I took watch with Collins. Mason was asleep or pretending to be. The kid sat close to me, his rifle across his lap, jumping at every sound. Sergeant, he said quietly, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you think we're going to make it out? I wanted to lie, to give him hope, but something in his eyes told me he'd see through it. I don't know, I admitted, but I know we keep trying until we can't anymore. He nodded slowly. I keep thinking about my mom. She told me not to join up. Said the military would get me killed. I laughed at her. Said I'd be fine. He paused. She's going to be right, isn't she? Don't talk like that. I'm so hungry, Sergeant. I can't stop thinking about food. Real food, a burger, pizza, anything. And I know that's stupid, worrying about being hungry when we might die. But I can't help it. It's not stupid. Hunger is a survival instinct. It means you're still fighting. Or it means I'm turning into one of those things Diaz talked about. He looked at me, and in the firelight his eyes seemed hollow. His grandfather said the Wendigo was created by hunger. What if that's what's happening to us? What if the longer we stay out here, the more we starve, the more we become like it? That's just folklore. Is it? 3 soldiers with fresh tracks but weeks-old bodies. Voices that sound exactly like us. Diaz seeing things that might be real. What's folklore and what's not anymore? I didn't have an answer, because the line between rational explanation and supernatural horror was blurring with each passing hour. Dawn came reluctantly, the sky barely lighter than night. Diaz's fever had broken, but he looked worse somehow. Sunken eyes, gray skin, lips cracked and bleeding. He could barely sit up. How do you feel? I asked. Like death, he croaked. But I'm alive. That's something. He paused. Did I say anything last night? You were delirious. Fever dreams, right? Dreams. But the way he said it, I knew he didn't believe me. And I knew he remembered. We couldn't move Diaz. Not today. Maybe not for several days. Which meant we were stuck here, burning through supplies, getting weaker. I'm going hunting, I announced. Mason, stay with Diaz. Collins, you're with me. Hunting with what? Mason asked. We don't have traps. No proper equipment. We improvise. Make snares from paracord. Check the stream for fish. Something. It was a desperate plan, but desperate was all we had left. Collins and I moved along the stream, searching for signs of wildlife. We found nothing. No tracks, no droppings, no sign that anything lived in these woods. After 2 hours, Collins stopped walking. Sergeant, there's nothing here. No animals, nothing. It's like the forest is dead. We keep looking. For what? There's nothing to find. His voice rose, edged with panic. We're going to starve out here. We're going to die like those other soldiers, frozen and forgotten. Get a hold of yourself, Private. Why? What's the point? He laughed, a bitter sound. We're lost. Our equipment doesn't work. One of us is sick. We haven't eaten a real meal in a week. And something is hunting us. Something that can mimic our voices and walk through a forest without leaving consistent tracks. We're dead. We just haven't stopped moving yet. I grabbed his jacket, pulled him close. Listen to me. You break now, you die. Simple as that. We don't have the luxury of panic. So you're gonna pull yourself together and we're gonna keep trying. Understand? He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We turned back toward camp. That's when we found it. A deer dead, lying in the snow. Fresh, killed recently. Its throat torn out, its belly opened. But the strange thing was, none of it had been eaten. The meat was intact. Whatever killed it hadn't been hungry. It had killed for sport, or as a message. We can use this, Collins said, moving toward it. Fresh meat. We can. Don't touch it. Something about the deer felt wrong. The way it was positioned. Too perfect. Like it had been placed there. Like bait. But we need food. It's a trap. Has to be. A trap set by what? An animal? Sergeant, you're being paranoid. Maybe I was. But every instinct screamed at me not to touch that deer. We were being tested, tempted. And I had a horrible feeling that if we took that meat, we'd be crossing a line we couldn't come back from. We leave it, I ordered. We find another way. Collins looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But we walked away from that deer, from that fresh meat, and I felt eyes watching us from the trees, judging us. When we returned to camp empty-handed, Mason's face fell. Nothing, I confirmed. Diaz was awake, propped against a rock. He looked at me with eyes that seemed too old, too knowing. You found the deer, he said. It wasn't a question. How did you? And you didn't take it? Good. He coughed. A wet rattling sound. That's the test. The first test. It offers you food when you're desperate. Easy meat. But the meat is poisoned. Not with chemicals, with intent. You eat it, and you become what it wants you to become. This is insane, Mason muttered. We're talking about a dead deer like it's some kind of supernatural trial. Isn't it? Diaz asked. How many things have happened that you can explain rationally, Lieutenant? How many? Mason didn't answer. That night we each ate half a protein bar. It wasn't enough. Not even close. My stomach cramped with hunger. My head was fuzzy from lack of calories. I could see the same suffering in the others. Collins's cheeks were hollow. Mason's hands shook constantly. Even Diaz, despite his fever, looked thin and weak. We can't keep this up, Mason said quietly. Another few days and we'll be too weak to walk. So what do you suggest? I asked. Tomorrow we take the deer. If it's still there, we cook it thoroughly, test it first. We need protein. No. Diaz's voice was firm despite his weakness. You take that meat, you've given in. That's what it wants. Your hunger, your desperation. It feeds on that. It's not real, Mason shouted suddenly. None of this is real. The Wendigo is a myth, a story. We're just lost and starving and seeing patterns that aren't there. Then explain the bodies, I said quietly. Explain the voices. Explain how our compass readings change every time we check them. Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. No explanation came. We sat in silence, listening to our stomachs growl, to the wind in the trees, to the sound of something moving just beyond the firelight. Always moving, always watching. Somewhere deep in that night, I heard Collins get up. I pretended to be asleep, watching through half-closed eyes as he picked up his rifle and walked toward the edge of camp. Collins, I called softly. Where are you going? He stopped but didn't turn around. I can hear it calling. Says it has food. Real food. Hot food. Says if I just come to it, I can eat. I can be warm. That's not real. You know it's not real. Does it matter? He turned, and in the dim light, his eyes looked wrong. Too bright, too desperate. Real or not, I'm starving. We're all starving. Maybe giving in is the only way to survive. I stood slowly, keeping my movements calm. Step back from the edge, private. That's an order. I'm tired of orders. Tired of pretending we have a plan. Tired of being hungry. He took another step into the darkness. Collins. Diaz's voice cut through the night, stronger than it should have been. Look at your shadow. Collins froze. Slowly, he looked down at the snow. In the firelight, his shadow stretched out before him. But it wasn't the shadow of a man anymore. It was too tall, too thin, with limbs that stretched unnaturally long. Collins stumbled backward with a strangled cry. What? What is that? That's what you become if you listen to it, Diaz said. That's what it's offering. An end to hunger. But the price is everything that makes you human. Collins collapsed in the snow, sobbing. Mason and I pulled him back to the fire. He shook violently. Whether from cold or fear or something else, I couldn't tell. It's inside all of us now, Diaz said quietly. The hunger, the cold, the desperation. That's how it works. It doesn't need to catch us. We're becoming it on our own. Then how do we stop it? Mason asked. We don't give in. No matter how hungry we get, no matter what it offers, we don't cross that line. And if we're too weak to resist? Diaz looked at each of us in turn. Then we make sure we don't become what's out there. One way or another. The implication hung heavy in the cold air. If we felt ourselves changing, if we knew we were losing the battle against hunger and cold and whatever this thing was, we'd have to end it ourselves. I looked at my rifle lying beside me, then at the others. We all understood. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about staying human. And if we couldn't do that, we had to make sure we didn't become monsters. The fire burned low. The night stretched on. And in the darkness, something circled our camp, getting closer with each passing hour. Waiting for one of us to break. Waiting for the hunger to win. Hashtag only 2 made it out. Day 8. Or was it 9? Time had lost meaning. The cold, the hunger, the fear. They all blended together until each day felt like the one before. Endless. Hopeless. Diaz could walk again, though barely. He moved like an old man, each step careful, deliberate. His eyes had changed. They looked past things now, seeing something the rest of us couldn't, or maybe refusing to see what was really there. Mason had stopped pretending to lead. He just followed, moving when we moved, stopping when we stopped. The weight of command had finally broken him completely. Collins worried me most. He'd stopped talking. He just stared ahead with empty eyes, his lips moving silently. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at his hands like they belonged to someone else. And me? I was holding on by threads. My body was eating itself. I could feel my muscles wasting, my mind growing foggy. The hunger was a living thing inside me, clawing, demanding. We'd been following the stream for 3 days. It had led us nowhere, just deeper into the forest, into territory that felt older, darker. The trees here were massive, ancient, their branches blocking out what little light filtered through the overcast sky. We need to stop, Mason said, his voice weak. Rest. We need rest. If we stop, we don't start again, I said. We keep moving. To where? He laughed. A broken sound. We're just walking in circles. The stream, it's not leading anywhere. Look. He pulled out the map and pointed. We should have hit the main river 2 days ago. But there's nothing. Just this stream going on forever. He was right. The stream should have merged with something larger by now. Instead, it just continued, winding through the forest in impossible loops, sometimes even seeming to flow uphill. The forest is playing with us, Diaz said quietly. It's been playing with us since day 1. The compass is spinning, the GPS failing, the tracks that don't make sense. It's all designed to keep us here, keep us lost, keep us hungry. Forests don't play with people, Mason said, but there was no conviction in his words. This one does. Diaz sat heavily on a fallen log. My grandfather told me, these woods, they're old. Older than maps, older than names. And they remember. They remember what happened here. The winters when people starved. When they made choices that damned them. The forest remembers, and it's still hungry. Stop, Collins said suddenly. His first word in hours. Just stop talking about it. Stop saying its name. Stop feeding it. Feeding what? Mason asked. Our fear. Our belief. That's what it eats. Not flesh. Fear. The more we believe in it, the stronger it gets. From the mouths of madness, sometimes comes truth. Collins was right. Every time we acknowledged what was hunting us, every time we spoke about the Wendigo, we gave it power, made it more real. But how do you not think about something when it's all around you? When every shadow holds its shape? When every sound could be its approach? We camped that night in a small clearing. No fire. We were out of fuel. The cold was absolute, seeping into bones, into blood, into the core of who we were. We huddled together for warmth, our bodies shaking uncontrollably. This was hypothermia territory. Another night like this and we'd start losing fingers, toes, or we'd just not wake up. Sometimes that seemed like the better option. I need to tell you something, Diaz said into the darkness. While I still can. Save your strength, I told him. No. You need to hear this. He coughed, a wet sound. When I was delirious, when I was seeing things, I wasn't just hallucinating. I was seeing the truth. The forest, it showed me. Showed you what? What we are. What we're becoming. He paused. We're not the first group they sent here. There have been others over the years. Different units. Same mission. Same outcome. That's impossible, Mason said. Why would they keep sending people here? To study it. To understand it. They know something's here. Something that breaks the normal rules and they want to weaponize it. Or contain it. Or maybe they're just feeding it. I don't know. But those bodies we found? That was us. That's always been us. You're not making sense, I said, though a cold dread was spreading through me. The dates on those IDs 20 years old. But the tracks were fresh. Don't you see? Time doesn't work right here. We're not just lost in space. We're lost in time. Those soldiers died 20 years ago, or they'll die 20 years from now. Or they're dying right now in a different version of the same moment. It's all happening at once. That's insane, Mason whispered. Is it? Explain anything else that's happened. Explain any of it with logic. Diaz looked at each of us. We're caught in something we can't understand. A loop, a trap, and the only way out is to stop playing by its rules. What rules? Collins asked. Hunger, fear, desperation. Those are the rules. As long as we're hungry, as long as we're afraid, we're feeding it, making it stronger. We need to break the cycle. How? I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. We stop running. We stop being prey. We face it. Face what? We don't even know what we're fighting. Yes, we do. We're fighting ourselves. Our own hunger. Our own fear. The Wendigo isn't something separate. It's what we become when we give in. When we let the hunger win. The words settled over us like snow. Cold. Heavy. Undeniable. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Collins spoke. I saw something. Earlier today. I didn't say anything because I thought I was losing my mind. But I need to tell you now. What did you see? I asked. My mother. She was standing in the trees, about 30 meters away. She called my name, said she was cold, asked me to come to her. He paused. But my mother's been dead for 3 years. I was at her funeral. The voice mimicry, Mason said. Like before. No, this was different. It wasn't just her voice. It was her. I saw her face, her coat, everything. And for a second, I wanted to go to her so badly because I miss her, because I'm so tired and cold and hungry, and I just wanted someone to take care of me again. But I didn't go, because I looked at her eyes and they were wrong. Empty. Hungry. She wasn't my mother. She was wearing my mother's face, but underneath. He shuddered. Whatever's out there, it's getting better at pretending to be human. Or getting worse at staying human, Diaz added. Morning came eventually, though morning felt like just a slightly less dark version of night. We could barely move. Our bodies had no energy left. The hunger was beyond pain now. It was numbness. Acceptance. We need to make a decision, I said. We're not making it another day like this. So we either find food, real food, or we end this on our own terms. The deer might still be there, Mason said quietly. The one we found before. You know what taking that meat means? Diaz said. I know it means we might live another few days. Right now, that seems worth it. We looked at each other, for soldiers reduced to skeletons, debating whether to cross a line we'd sworn not to cross. Let's vote, Collins said. Democracy. Majority rules. This isn't a democracy, I said. This is survival. But fine. Vote. Take the deer. Yes, Mason said immediately. Collins hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Diaz shook his head. No. I'd rather die human. They all looked at me. The deciding vote. I thought about my mother, long dead. My brother, killed in action. All the people I'd lost over the years. All the times I'd made hard choices, impossible choices, and lived with the consequences. This should have been easy. Take the meat, survive a few more days, maybe find a way out. Simple math. But I kept thinking about those bodies. Those soldiers with their frozen eyes and twisted limbs. I thought about the shadows that moved wrong, about the voices that knew our names, about everything Diaz had said about what we were becoming. No, I said finally. We don't take the deer. We find another way. There is no other way, Mason shouted. You're condemning us to death. Maybe, but we die as who we are, not as what it wants us to become. Mason stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed, bitter and broken. Fine, fine. We'll die nobly. We'll die with our principles intact, and we'll be just as dead. Mason? I started, but he was already walking away, stumbling through the snow. Lieutenant, I called after him. Get back here. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He just kept walking, heading in the direction where we'd found the deer days ago. I started after him, but Diaz grabbed my arm. Let him go. He's going for the meat. I know. Let him go. He made his choice. We can't just abandon him. We're not abandoning him. He's abandoning himself. Diaz looked at me with those two old eyes. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You know that. I did know that, but it didn't make it easier to watch Mason disappear into the trees. We waited for him. An hour. 2 hours. He didn't come back. Should we look for him? Collins asked. No, Diaz said. Whatever happens next, we don't want to see it. We didn't, because somewhere in the distance we heard screaming. Started human, terrified, agonized. Then it changed. Became something else. Something that started as a scream and ended as a howl. Then silence. Collins was crying quietly. I wanted to cry too, but I couldn't. Some part of me had frozen along with everything else. We keep moving, I said. That's all we can do. There were 3 of us now. 3 out of 4. And I wondered which of us would be next. We walked for hours, though I couldn't tell in which direction. The stream had vanished at some point. Or maybe we'd left it behind. The forest all looked the same now. Trees and snow and shadows. Collins stopped suddenly. Do you hear that? I listened. First nothing. Then I heard it. A sound like wind chimes. Delicate. Beautiful. Coming from somewhere ahead. Don't, Diaz said. Don't follow it. It's trying to lure us. But Collins was already moving toward the sound. It's coming from that direction. Something's there. Maybe a cabin. Maybe people. Collins, stop. He didn't stop. And I realized with horror that I wanted to follow the sound too. Because it was beautiful and everything else had been ugly for so long. Because it promised something different, something better. Diaz grabbed my shoulder hard. Fight it. You're stronger than this. Was I? I didn't feel strong. I felt weak, tired, ready to give up. The sound grew louder, more insistent. And Collins was running now, crashing through the snow toward it. Collins! I shouted. But my voice was lost in the sound of those impossible chimes. He disappeared into a thick stand of trees. We heard him laugh. A sound of pure joy. Then the laughter cut off abruptly. Silence. Collins! I called. No answer. Diaz and I moved forward carefully, weapons ready. We found him in a small clearing. He was standing perfectly still, staring up at the trees. Collins! I approached slowly. You okay? He turned to look at me, and my blood ran cold. His eyes were empty. Not just vacant, but actually empty. No light, no consciousness. Just hollow sockets that reflected nothing. "Run," Diaz said quietly. "Run now." We ran. Behind us, I heard Collins start to move. But the sound wasn't human footsteps. It was something else. Something faster. Something wrong. We ran until we couldn't breathe. Until our legs gave out. Until we collapsed in the snow. "Just us now," Diaz gasped. "Just the two of us left." "What happened to them?" I asked, though I knew. I'd known since day one. They gave in. Fed their hunger. Followed their fear. And it took them. He coughed violently. "It's going to take us too. Eventually. We're too weak to resist much longer." "Then what do we do?" He pulled out his sidearm, checked the magazine. "One bullet left." "When I tell you," he said calmly, "you're going to take this weapon, and you're going to do what needs to be done." "Diaz, no. Listen to me. I'm not going to become one of those things. I won't. So when I tell you I'm losing it, when you see me start to change, you end it. Quick and clean. Promise me." "I can't." "You have to. Because if you don't, I'll become what they became. And then it'll be just you, alone. And you won't last a day." He pressed the pistol into my hand. "Promise me, James. Promise me you won't let me turn." I took the weapon, felt its weight. One bullet. One chance to stay human. "I promise," I whispered. We kept moving because stopping meant death. Simple as that. The sun was setting, though I'd lost track of time days ago. Everything was gray, colorless, cold. "There," Diaz said suddenly. "Look." Through the trees I saw lights. Not the pale ghostly lights from before. Real lights. Electric lights. "A cabin," I said, hardly daring to believe it. We stumbled toward it. A small structure. Smoke rising from its chimney. A snowmobile parked outside. Signs of human habitation. Real, living humans. I pounded on the door. "Hello. We need help. Please." The door opened. An old man stood there, weathered face, kind eyes. He took one look at us and his expression changed to alarm. "Jesus Christ, get inside. You boys look half dead." He pulled us in. The warmth was shocking, painful. I almost cried from the sensation of not being cold. The cabin was small but well stocked. The old man, who said his name was Thomas, gave us hot soup, blankets, warmth. "How long you boys been out there?" he asked. 8 days, I said. "Maybe 9. We got lost during a training exercise." Thomas shook his head. "Lucky you found me. Few more hours and you'd have been gone. Seen it before. Forest takes people sometimes. Especially in winter." "Have you?" I paused. "Have you seen others?" "2 men might have come through here recently." His face darkened. "Seen tracks. Strange tracks. Too big for any animal I know. They circle my cabin sometimes at night. I board up when that happens. Wait till morning." "Smart," Diaz said quietly. We ate slowly, letting our bodies adjust. Thomas had a radio. He said he'd call for help at first light. For now, we just needed to rest. That night, I took watch while Diaz slept. Through the window, I saw them. Figures in the darkness. Tall, impossibly thin, moving between the trees. And at the front, 2 familiar shapes. Mason, Collins, or what they'd become. They didn't approach the cabin. They just stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. Waiting. I understood then. They hadn't been killed. They'd been changed. Absorbed. And now they were part of it. Part of the hunger that never ended. "You see them," Thomas said quietly. He'd come up beside me without sound. "You know about them. Known about them all my life. My grandfather was Ojibwe. He told me the stories. The Wendigo, the hunger that walks. It's real. Always has been. How do we stop it? You don't. You survive it. You resist it. And you get out before it takes you to." He looked at me. "Your friend there, he's fighting it hard. But I can see it in him. The hunger's got its hooks in deep." I looked at Diaz, sleeping restlessly. His face was thin, his skin gray. But his eyes, even closed, seemed troubled. "How long does he have?" "Days. Maybe less. The hunger changes people. makes them into what it wants. Best thing you can do is get him out of these woods before it's too late. And if you can't, Thomas handed me the pistol I'd set aside. Then you do what's necessary. You end it with mercy before they become something that knows no mercy at all. Dawn came. Thomas used his radio to call for help. A rescue helicopter was coming. They'd be here in 2 hours. 2 hours. We just had to last 2 more hours. Diaz was getting worse fast. His hands shook. His eyes had that hollow look I'd seen in Collins. He kept staring at the door, at the forest beyond. I can hear them, he said. They're calling me, saying I should join them, that I'd never be hungry again. Fight it, I told him. Just 2 more hours. Help is coming. I don't know if I can last 2 hours. He looked at me, and for a moment his eyes were clear. If I change, if you see me becoming what they are, you remember your promise. I remember. The helicopter came 90 minutes later. The sound of its rotors was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. They loaded us in, wrapped us in thermal blankets. A medic checked our vitals, started IVs. We were lifted away from that forest, away from the cold and hunger and death. As we rose into the air, I looked down. The forest stretched endlessly below, and at the edge of the clearing, I saw them. 4 figures now standing among the trees. Mason, Collins, and 2 others I didn't recognize. All of them watching as we escaped. All of them waiting for the next group that would inevitably come. The debrief was thorough. They wanted to know everything. What happened, where the others were, why we'd survived when they hadn't. I told them most of it. The cold, the hunger, the disorientation. I left out the parts they wouldn't believe, the voices, the shadows, the things that wore human faces. They marked Mason and Collins as missing, presumed dead from exposure. They gave Diaz and me commendations for survival against impossible odds. But Diaz and I knew the truth. We hadn't survived. Not really. Part of us was still in those woods. Would always be in those woods. Some nights I still hear them calling. Mason's voice, Collins's voice, sometimes even my own voice, calling from a future I narrowly avoided. The hunger never really leaves. It's always there, gnawing at the edges, reminding me how close I came to becoming something else. Something that walks the frozen forests forever. Always hungry, never satisfied. They asked me if I'd testify about what happened, if I'd go on record about the conditions, the failed equipment, the lack of proper support. I told them no, because the truth wouldn't help anyone. The truth would just mark me as crazy. But I'll tell you this. If they ever send you to those woods in winter, if they ever give you coordinates near Lake of the Woods in February, you refuse. You desert if you have to. You do whatever it takes to stay away. Because something lives in that forest. Something old and hungry and patient. Something that wears the shapes of men and speaks with their voices. Something that feeds on desperation and turns human beings into empty shells that hunt the living. The Ojibwe called it Wendigo. The old people knew to fear it, to respect it, to stay away when winter came hard. We forgot those lessons. We thought our technology and training made us immune to old fears. We were wrong. And somewhere in those woods, 4 figures stand among the trees, waiting for the next group of soldiers who think they're just on a training exercise. Waiting for more to join their eternal hunt. Waiting for the hunger to win.